Another week of mixed messages from the White House, leaving some wondering if Trump's White House might be unraveling. But for now, his administration is standing firmly by his side.
Did you call him a moron?
I'm not going to deal with that kind of petty stuff.
I don't believe, and I just talked to the president, I don't think I'm being fired today.
First, Trump's chief of staff said the media has it all wrong. Today, it was the Senate Majority Leader's turn to pledge loyalty to the man who has belittled him.
We're together totally on this agenda to move America forward.
The troops may or may not be in disarray, but one thing's for sure, Trump's undoing a lot of agreements.
People will have great health care.
He's tried to back out of Obamacare, protections for the so-called dreamers, and the Paris Climate Accord.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
He's threatening to walk away from NAFTA.
We'll see what happens. We have a tough negotiation.
And then there's his threats to North Korea.
Rocket Man should have been handled a long time ago.
To talk about all of this, I'm joined by senior editor of The Atlantic, David Frum, and the Boston Herald's chief Washington reporter, Kimberly Atkins. So we'll get to North Korea, Iran, NAFTA, all of that in a moment. But Kimberly, again today, another news conference by a senior White House advisor official. Well, actually, he's not a White House advisor. He's chair of the Senate Majority, Mitch McConnell. Is it truly a love-in at the White House now, or is this just staging? What's going on?
Yeah, they're apparently trying to make it look like that, and this is very similar to what we saw from the Secretary of State, who called an unusual press conference last week to say how he's on the same page as the president after all the news reports that they're not, or the White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, who has to go out in front of the press and declare that he's not being fired. Today, President Trump and Mitch McConnell stood together, declared that they're on great terms and that the GOP agenda is completely intact. It's contrary to a lot of the reporting. And it comes at a time that I think the president and the White House realizes that they need the Congress to get anything done. They're pushing, they're trying to get a budget passed. They're trying to get tax cuts. Today, President Trump added a couple new items on the agenda, welfare reform and economic development. He needs Mitch McConnell to get through any of those things. And it's a contrast even just an hour earlier or so when the president was faulting the GOP Congress for not getting anything done, not taking any responsibility himself. So we've seen this repeatedly. It tried to go before the press and say, hey, everything's fine here, despite what you've heard.
Yeah, it is odd to watch, David. Like just 2 hours earlier, he was giving a news conference. He was asked about Steve Bannon, who was his advisor. And Steve Bannon has declared a season of war against people like Mitch McConnell. And then Trump is saying, yeah, I love Bannon, but here I love McConnell. Well, what's your interpretation? What's going on?
Well, Trump doesn't pay a lot of attention to congressional politics, but he is always arrayed with the forces of nihilism and destruction. Look, Mitch McConnell is doing his best to try to hold together a normal Republican congressional majority to get things done. It's very disappointing for him. He's a very unillusioned, unromantic politician, Mitch McConnell, and he knows he's behind time. There is almost a negligible record of legislative accomplishment. So President Trump sees that. He can't accept blame, as he said at the press conference, at his White House meeting earlier today, that obviously something has gone wrong, but it's not my fault. Bannon, who has a pot of money from a family, the Mercer family, that had not until now been an important force in Republican politics. Bannon is the spirit of destruction, and he loves to be at the center of attention. But he is going to try to put together a series of primary challenges to Republican incumbents in what is shaping up to be a terrible Republican year. This is as powerful a contribution as Bannon can make to losing the Republican majority altogether. Donald Trump understands that that isn't good for him, but he delights in destruction. And because he needs someone to blame, Mitch McConnell is at hand. And so Donald Trump is going to make himself a party to the destruction of the Republicans in Congress with imminent consequences for them and for him.
Kimberly, you were mentioning that he actually may need some help from Congress to get his agenda through. One of the big things for Canada, of course, is NAFTA. We're getting conflicting messages on that. What does Congress want? Where is that going? It sounds like it's dead. There was a whole new slew of demands put on the table today that to Canadians, negotiators, sound impossible. Where's that going?
Yeah, it does. And again, that's the president trying to put forward his America First policy sort of to protect American interests. But a lot of folks in Congress on both sides of the aisle are very wary about pulling out of NAFTA altogether. They worry about that it could really hurt businesses and raise tariffs on exports and really wreak all kind of havoc to American companies, maybe more so than the effect that it would have in places like Canada and Mexico. So we'll really have to see. I think it will be very difficult to convince lawmakers that pulling out of NAFTA is a good idea. But again, the president is trying to keep a campaign promise. He campaigned on ripping up these bad agreements that President Obama either entered into or kept in place and renegotiating better deals because he's a businessman and that's what he does. I think he's trying to put forward that message, but I think he knows with NAFTA, even with the Iran nuclear deal, it's a lot harder to pull out of than he stated.
David?
The president has, of course, the power to withdraw from NAFTA at his own discretion. He doesn't need Congress on 6 months' notice. What is happening here is a kind of subterranean trial of strength. President Trump wants to blow up NAFTA for a bunch of reasons, including, by the way, that because Bill Clinton signed it, he thinks it's a Clinton-era accomplishment, not understanding that actually it was substantially negotiated under the George H.W. Bush administration. But he is encountering resistance here because there are a lot of important economic forces. You know, unlike the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was not yet law when Donald Trump withdrew the United States from it, that did a lot of damage, a lot of terrible economic damage, a lot of damage to America's standing in the world. But because it hadn't gone into effect, there were no vested interests attached yet to it. But there are a lot of interests attached to NAFTA. Pork producers in the United States look to NAFTA. Never mind all of the manufacturing and just-in-time shipping. Never mind that Trump states actually tend to be highly export-oriented states. Texas, even a state like Arkansas, which you may think of as not a state exposed to the international economy. It's the headquarters of Walmart. It's a major American agricultural exporter. And Donald Trump is discovering that he's here in a conflict with the American business community, Republican governors. He may, and he is going to have to ask himself, how much is he willing to do? He has the legal authority to do it, out of pique, out of his own ideology, and to put himself at odds with the rest of what would normally be his party. It's a huge risk. It's not clear that he understands how big the risk is, and it's not clear that he understands how much he may need these people. 2018 is going to be a much worse year for him than 2017 is, and 2019, if the Democrats make gains in either chamber of Congress, may be a worse year still.
We are out of time. I wanted to talk about Iran and North Korea, but it's all so fascinating, and there's similarities in all of them. But thank you, both of you, for your comments tonight. We'll talk again. Thank you.
Thank you.